think we're recording. Cheers, Worcester. It's January the 16th, 2018, and this is 508, a show about Worcester. I'm Mike Benedetti, and this is Brendan Milliken.
What's happening, brother?
Brendan, we're just doing our show, man.
We are.
We're just having a good time hanging out at our house.
Who do we have here with us?
Being cool. Today on the show, our special guest is Kayti Burt of Den of Geek. How you doing, Kayti?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Thanks for being here.
Kayti is a Worcester resident and a pop culture journalist. Today on the show, we'll be talking about Black Lightning, murder, extending Worcester City Council terms from 2 to 3 years, legalized weed, illegalized weed, toxic masculinity, updating stories, Doctor Who, and The Last Jedi.
It's a full docket.
Are we back? Worcester, we're back on Unity Radio 102.9 FM. I'm Michael Benedetti. I'm Kayti Burt. I'm Brendan Milliken. And
Not really
we're on
that
the
sweet,
radio talking about Worcester. I want to talk about.
I know I don't have the most gruff voice, but
I
it
want
can't
to
be
talk
that
about.
My voice is pretty gruff.
I want to talk about today's city council agenda. I want to talk about drugs, and I want to talk about people killing people. And then we're going to connect these all back into like Black Lightning, or there being a lady on Doctor Who or something, probably.
Ambitious.
Today, the city council is going to be they're going to be taking Warmland Street, which is a private street, off of the official map, which is something which is done presumably so that the person who owns the street can change the street, rebuild in the area, something like that. Gary Rosen has an article or an item on the agenda asking the manager into us having a van that will drive around the neighborhood so that people can do municipal paperwork without going online or going downtown. Apparently they have something like this in Boston. Councilor Rivera has an item.
Is Gary going to drive the van?
If Gary was going to drive the van, I would be 100% in favor of this.
Yeah.
Without that, I feel like it seems less exciting to me to spend this money. And
I'm going to suggest to Councilor Rosen that he take this a step further and he actually be willing to go to people's houses and help them do paperwork in exchange for maybe dinner or something, or maybe snacks. It doesn't have to be a full dinner.
I feel like he should get an official city vehicle, so he can sell his own car and have his vehicle from the city.
He can be the mobile city hall, because otherwise you're just recreating the existing problem, right? If the argument is people can't get to city hall to get city business done, I'm sure you're still going to have people who can't get to the senior center or can't get to a library or whatever the case may be. The only way to solve this problem is actually have Gary take it upon himself to go door to door and ensure that everybody has their needs met by city hall.
I would love this. Gary, I love Gary Rosen so much. Everyone knows this already. Councilor Rivera has an item on the agenda asking the manager if a city person has concerns about gentrification, being displaced about gentrification, is there someone in the city that they could contact who might be able to help them with that in some respect? Councilor Bergman has an item asking the city's lawyer what the council would have to do to revise things like the length of a city council term, the attendance meetings for the city council, etc. And there's an item on the agenda where the mayor is asking the manager for the city to support local groups who are working to establish a memorial to the legendary abolitionist, feminist, and Worcesterite radical Abby Kelly Foster, who died in 1887, whose birthday I think was yesterday.
Shared with Martin Luther King Jr.?
I think so. We have a couple. There's 3 papers that I was looking at this week that were very interesting, academic papers. One of them. And I think that they relate to the, is it an uncertain future that marijuana has in Worcester, Brendan, with the federal government saying, oh, you know that part where like this stuff is illegal on the federal level, we're going to start taking that seriously again?
No, I think that's, no, it won't be an issue at all.
You don't think it will be an issue?
No, because realistically, I think you're really only talking the DEA at that point, right? Because it's a federal issue. State police and all local police, almost universally, local police and the state police and the state office
are not going to mess with
EOPS have all said, yeah, we're not going to touch it. So really, then you're just left with federal enforcement, and that's kind of the DEA's job. The DEA up in here, if I'm not mistaken, is almost entirely focused on opiate trafficking, as they should be, because that's an actual problem. So their options at that point would either be to redirect efforts at marijuana and stop focusing so much, it would seem, on opiates. And I just can't see the DEA thing. You know, what would be a really good PR move right now is let's just walk away from this whole opioid crisis and go back to focusing on weed. I just don't see that being a win for anybody. And yeah, so Massachusetts is our recreational bill, adult use bill should be coming full circle in July, I think it is, when retail can start going online. The likelihood is we will probably find a federal solution to this prior to that. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a very simple states' rights issue too, right? Like, you know, from the perspective, if the governor, the attorney general's office, law enforcement on the state level all agree, we really don't care what the federal government says now. Like, that's actually what you want, because then as soon as something does happen, a raid, a tax issue, a banking issue, now you actually have standing to move a state case at the behest of state government through the federal system. So the feds then actually, through the court system, need to be able to defend articulate and defend their stance. That's how we get real change done in the United States, right? This is how things like same-sex marriage come about, is by states saying, we disagree with you, and taking it to court.
All right, Martin Luther King, let me interrupt you and ask you this question. Doesn't this thing of the Justice Department saying they're going to enforce this, though, hasn't this changed like the way things are going to operate financially, that people can like no longer be confident having a bank account because it could be seized at the federal level?
That technically was the case anyways. I mean, the
but
order that
you want people to be able to have a bank account because you want people to be able to have to pay taxes, because you want people to be able, you would like this to become like, you would like it to no longer be the case that in order to do things financially or to have some sort of contract enforcement in this business, that you have to have a bunch of dudes with guns who you paid personally rather than the police do it.
You are preaching to the choir, but again, I think that's actually why you want the state to move forward in the trajectory we're already on, is so that they can then have standing to make a legal claim that it is the federal government that is hampering this degree of progress. And I mean, the banking thing isn't new, right? I mean, the first couple of years that California was doing medical, first decade that California was doing medical, the first couple of years of Colorado doing recreational, banking was a no-go issue to begin with. That's the reason why this whole memo, was it the Cole memo, I believe it was called, something along those lines, you know, under the Obama administration came about, was so that the FDIC insured banks would relax a little bit, take a breath, and realize that the IRS was not going to be coming in and doing raids and what have you. If the feds want to change that, I mean, so who's likely to complain now? Connie and the banks,
Gary
right?
Rosen.
I mean, you now have major banks that have seen this massive influx of cash deposits from this new industry. Do you think they're going to be quiet and say, you know what, take all that money back? We didn't want to have anything to do with that. That's not going to help our bottom line or our lending or whatnot. The whole thing is just silly. And, you know,
Okay. Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to read. I mean, one thing I'll tell you, Brendan, is that the space recognition software does not recognize the side of your head as a.
It doesn't?
No. So yeah.
How's that?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I've been winning the.
Mike, we have another caller, and I don't know that this one has anything to do with pest control.
Oh, it got you, but it's anyway. I want to read a.
Well, while you're reading, caller, what do we got going on?
Oh.
Hi.
Oh no. Wait, we have.
You are battling. No, that's
We have
great.
two callers at the same
That was
time.
fantastic. I think we should let them. You know what
Maybe
we
they
should
could
do
split
is
the $5.
callers. We're now plural. Callers.
Can we put the callers on the monitors in the room so this camera can pick it up too?
Can we? Oh no, I cannot.
Okay. Well, no one will know what these callers are saying, but it's hilarious. Go ahead, caller. Yes. Go ahead, caller. No. Go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I think Mike is actually doubling down on the disruptiveness and is
you're
now
coming
disrupting
really
you.
clear. Brendan, did you have something you wanted to say to that?
What was that?
Did you have something you wanted to say to that, Brendan?
No. Go ahead, caller.
Caller, that's a really great point. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate that. That was really fascinating.
It was great hearing from you.
So this first paper is called "Is Legal Pot Criminalizing Mexican Drug Trafficking Organizations?" The answer is yes. This is a paper by Evelina Gavrilova, Takuma Kamada, and Flora Zoutman, which was published in the November issue of the Economic Journal. They're looking at medical marijuana laws and violent crime in states that border Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Finding that the closer you are to Mexico, And the more drug-related the crimes, the bigger impact there is in reducing them from medical marijuana laws, and that they do in fact lead to a reduction in crime. And their induction is that this is because it is impacting Mexican drug trafficking organizations. The open question here is, of course, is how much marijuana is coming in via Mexico and Mexican drug trafficking organizations, and how much marijuana is coming in via other places.
There's some really interesting stuff there too, though, because when you talk about Mexican cartel activity, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're talking about Mexico, right? Because you're now talking about institutions that are dealing in dollar figures that only large international, multinational corporations are capable of dealing in. And there's arguably just as much involvement with production of marijuana funded by Mexican drug cartels, but say in Canada, right? Because there's no reason why you don't need to stay geographic, especially when you're not paying taxes and you're not licensing your business, right? So finding a grower up in BC and funding their operation is probably easier at this point than it is focusing on actual domestic production in Mexico.
Very good.
You seem really concerned about the Mexican border. Just saying, like, there really are no borders when it comes to drugs.
We live in a world without borders, Brendan.
When we're doing drugs, yes, there is a world without borders. If you
do have drugs, definitely.
Black market stuff. That's just what you're always going to have. Is the borders don't really matter so much.
It's so frustrating not having physical control of the camera, and so being able to just say, "Now you're done talking."
Yeah, you can't do that.
Camera's looking. No, I can't do it.
I think the camera should get the $5.
You could slip $10 and and mute me, but I'll slip them 20.
The show more than Hanks can grab the camera. Hanks can win that $5. Investigating the effects of medical marijuana laws of educational attainment. This is a paper by Yao-Wan Lee and Marco A. Palma in the most recent edition of Economics Letters. And their big takeaway is that medical marijuana laws decrease high school graduation rates. They saw them dropping about 0.36 percentage points, which in a total of 19 states and I didn't need to read this paper. This is not helpful.
How can you make that argument, though, when kids in high school can't legally be using marijuana?
Because I think the assumption here would be that having medical marijuana laws means that there's more marijuana around and then more for kids to smoke. Although the amount of kids smoking weed has gone down. I'm sure they can.
Yeah, no, that paper does. When you look at the data, the federal data that's out there, every state that has gone through legalization, whether it be medical or recreational, has seen a sharp decrease in youth usage rates.
I was talking to
it almost sounds like they're making the argument that the law itself, the language in some bill, has actually impacted graduation rates.
I feel like now's the time when, in some ways, you could say things are worse than ever, but in terms of drug use or violence or whatever, it's so hard to say that in this country. I had a young man, lifelong Worcester, he was telling me the other day about how, this generation today, blah, 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 and it was all you do just not to quote chapter and verse on all these statistics to him, because these kids today, Brendan, unlike our generation, we were, I think, the biggest cohort in terms of sex and drugs.
We were a mess. Yeah, it was a great time, but we were a mess.
Almost the most violent cohort. Yeah. And ever since then, it has been all the other way, downhill, uphill, whatever, in this country.
Sunshine and rainbows.
All the other way. I've got a third paper called Community and the Crime Decline, The Causal Effects of Local Nonprofits on Violent Crime by Patrick Sharkey and Gerard Torres Espinoza, published in the October 2017 edition of the American Sociological Review. They are looking at the impact of local nonprofit organizations, what role they played in the national decline of violence from the 1990s to the 2010s. Drawing on a panel of 264 cities spanning more than 20 years, we estimate that every 10 additional organizations focusing on crime and community life in a city with 100,000 residents leads to a 9% reduction in the murder rate, a 6% reduction in the violent crime rate, and a 4% reduction in the property crime rate.
And they managed to do all that without blaming weed.
Well, and it's interesting. He had a big op-ed in this Sunday's New York Times, which is how I got turned on to this. And in this op-ed, in some ways, that sounds like a bit of a, like the kind of thing that liberals really want to hear about, all these community organizations really are making an impact. And that 10% is a big drop. In this New York Times op-ed, he also focuses on things like just sort of like general, like the cops, for example, and again, the way that things are much safer in our cities than they were. And he points, the statistic that I think really jumped out at us is, I'll read this paragraph. Though homicide is not a common cause of death for most of the United States population, for African American men between the ages of 15 and 34, it is the leading cause, which means that any change in the homicide rate has a disproportionate impact on them. The sociologist Michael Friedson and I calculated what the life expectancy would be today for blacks and whites had the homicide rate never shifted from its level in 1991. This again was when Brendan and I were out running the streets. We found that the national decline in the homicide rate since then has increased the life expectancy of black men by roughly 9 months. That figure may not seem like much, but it is exceedingly rare for any change in society to generate such a degree of change in life expectancy. And he points out that basically the hood is as dangerous today for poor people as the ritzy suburbs were for wealthy people in 1993.
Which is really crazy, and
Yeah.
only crazy in the context of if you poll the average American, the average person, as to whether or not society was improving or whatnot, most people knee-jerk and say, no, it's never been worse. And I don't know if that's just a feature of getting older
Because you
or
watch
whatnot.
these Avengers films and you're like, these aliens are coming out from the sky. I used to see it in comics like everywhere. Real, but now I've seen it with my own eyes, Brandon.
The sky opened up and they just came down here.
Murky.
No, but seriously, we talk about this all the time. We've been talking about this for years. That the reality is that it's never been better to be alive. Really, by all conceivable measure. When you can identify an actual decrease or an increase in life expectancy and a demographic and tie that back to something that might seem trivial, like not-for-profits or community organizing or whatnot, that's huge. And it's huge, stacked on top of already marked decreases going on, 3 decades now, when it comes to violent crime, when it comes to just safety in general, all the big hallmark measures that we would use to judge the health of society. We ain't doing so bad.
What is going on with the show today, Brandon? Why are we so happy?
Katie's here.
It's my effect.
Katie is here. Katie, let's talk to you for about a minute more, and then we'll do the last segment all with you. Is Black Lightning good?
Black Lightning is good. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but if you watch other superhero shows, especially on the CW, it's just...
We're talking about Arrow. We're talking about The Flash.
Legends of Tomorrow. Supergirl, which I do really like. But it's...
How does it rank?
It's about an older superhero. He's coming out of superhero retirement. He's not been a superhero for 9 years, and he's like, you know what? They need me again. He's a high school principal, so his alter ego is just way more involved in trying to enact change in ways that feel real and possible. That's the best part of the show. The superhero stuff is fine, but it just feels like it's grounded in a setting that is much more realistic and interesting than any of the other superhero shows are even attempting to do.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We're going to go to one more break. People at home, don't touch that dial because we're going to be talking more with Katie and Worcester here in a second on 508. All right, so now this is working.
What's that?
Now this is working. Although it's making weird choices. I think it can't see our faces very clearly.
I would actually... Did you change that vivid setting?
Oh.
I was noticing out there that the lights are so bright, I'm wondering if it's having a hard time determining skin color and whatnot. And there you are. And the other thing too is we've got these mics in our face.
Do you want to turn that light off and turn this light on?
No. There's a really great filter setting. It's almost like what you see on Instagram that it automatically imports, and the colors are so robust. When it's vivid, it almost makes sense for terrible outdoor lighting, but inside it might be too much.
Anyone who's watching this show, thank you for your patience and making it this far into this video. I'm really glad. Confused with
You did a great job. So, Hank, just so you're not completely in the dark here, Mike had suggested that there would be a $5 Uber gift card for somebody that could pull off disrupting the show.
Well, your first buddy,
that was fantastic.
He just keeps coming back.
I feel like he just
wants more. He will not give up.
Can you forward a call? Maybe we surprise him and have Ford's pest control pick up and.
He's being so patient. What do you want to talk
I
about?
want to talk about changing stories in the last segment.
Okay.
I want
Like modernizing or just changing?
just changing, just
Yeah.
people getting over people's getting over things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm ready.
That's what I want to talk about.
You want to talk about Doctor Who?
I do. I'm listed all I want to talk about. This is supposed to be about Worcester. It can't just be.
All right, just come on down
All
here.
right. Hey everybody.
There we go. Sorry.
Hey everybody. Welcome back to the 508 Radio Hour. My name is Michael Benedetti. Also today on the show with me is Katy Burt. Hi Katy.
Hello.
And Brendan Milliken.
What's happening, brother?
Hey Brendan. Katy Burt, what is going on these days with all of these crazy pop culture stories? Like you got Black Lightning, which has, I guess we've long had stories about teachers and principals, but less shows about black people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another show about black people.
Mm-hmm.
I guess nobody can complain they ruined Black Lightning because the original Black Lightning was also black. I like how they take these things from the 60s and the 70s, like Black Lightning or Black Panther, when it was very important for people to like put that in the title, and now it's just like whenever they reboot them or they put them on television, it sounds a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't want to just
Lightning.
like I think it's good that they called Creed rather than like Black Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
As funny as that is, it's funny for about 2 seconds, and then it just seems dumb. Again, like I feel like there's some affinity of this between like trying to get your head around the story of Worcester as being a hellhole of murder and decay versus Worcester as being like a functional American city. A similar thing of getting your head around the idea of like whatever. All the girls in Star Wars. Although you think Princess Leia is pretty cool, right?
Yeah, Princess Leia has always been cool.
Or especially this blowback against Doctor Who. This is a show where the main character is a guy. It's always been a guy. Always been a white guy, English guy. And we don't need to go into the ins and the outs of how the show works because if you follow pop culture, you know and you care, and if you don't, you're not going to pay attention to this anyway. But now it's going to be lady actress Jodie Whittaker.
Mm-hmm.
Have you caught any of this like blowback against this from reaction to your writing about Doctor Who?
Probably. I actually have started a policy of not reading the comments on a lot of my stories because for my mental health, I feel like it's not something, like if someone wants to have a conversation with me on Twitter or find me in another way, I'm always excited to talk about things, but there's a lot of vicious anonymous people on the internet.
The comment sections is always sometimes a hard way to negotiate these.
It is. It's not the best place
Conversations
to
as well.
facilitate conversation.
You know what always kills me about whenever you change a demographic for a long-standing character, whether it be race, gender, whatever the case may be, is that it makes it, because there are so many loud, angry people who are angry just because of a change, it makes it nearly impossible to levy legitimate criticisms on storytelling. You mentioned earlier the Ghostbusters reboot, right? Like, there was such a loud, hostile crowd surrounding the idea that the Ghostbusters could never be female. It made it impossible to just point out logically that it was just a terrible film. Like, the writing wasn't very good, the comedy wasn't very good, and like the apt comparison would have been like a bunch of younger comics who were just kind of getting their legs under them versus Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray at like the height of their careers. Like, it was like not a fair comparison, and it was, I think, disappointing to a fair number of people just because the movie wasn't as good, right? Like, but you can't make that criticism without sounding immediately like you're on team get all the girls out of the room, like that, and that's not the team that you want to be on.
It is frustrating. I mean, this is maybe why I make fun of us being so positive about Worcester, because I don't want to discount that somebody could complain about Worcester for any number of reasons, which is what I spend a lot of my personal recreational free time doing.
Lots of great things to complain about. Yeah.
And I think for me, whether you're, complaining about Worcester or complaining or being critical in a constructive way about Worcester or about stories, criticism is a sign of like love or it takes such time and energy to do it well. So people who just think that when you're criticizing something that's automatically an attack, or that means that you don't care about something. For me, that it means the opposite. If
Right.
you're doing it in a constructive manner,
Right.
because you're engaging with it.
When Mike and I are knocking, trivial things about City Hall, we're actually acknowledging that we watch city council meetings. And that in and of itself is like, that's some high level fanboy stuff there that, should not be discounted. We're only paying attention because we love.
This is why I love this pop culture conversation, because I do think that one of the most psychologically healthy ways you can engage with Worcester politics in an intense way is as a fanboy, is using the sorts of things that we use to relate to other forms of culture, and not taking it seriously as, I don't know, there's other ways you could look at it, like a sporting match, like some sort of political, actual legitimate political thing, like a war or whatever. I feel like those, to me, are less psychologically healthy than watching it as somebody who's watching a TV drama.
Oh sure, yeah, no, and that's probably the way it should be. And you pull a lot of the personality out of it, and you look at the big picture. And I love this as a package, but I can still criticize that there's a pothole in my driveway.
And we've only got about a minute left. Katie, thank you for being on 508 today. Brendan, thank you for being on 508 today. Mike, thank you for being on 508 today. No problem, fellas. And everybody, thanks for listening to this show, for putting up with the show. I'm really enjoying the way that we're doing this on the radio. We're still working through the technical hiccups.
To be fair, the technology is just fine. I think we're the hiccup. We're working through our own sort of hiccups.
If anyone had ever listened to the back catalog, there was an episode that was entirely static. There's really been a lot of episodes that had a lot of technical problems. So we're doing spectacular compared
And
to
I
some
think
of our
it's
problems.
more important that you get the stuff out into the world in some form.
It is. Anyway, and everybody, Black Lightning, where does it rank? You got 30 seconds left. Rank the DC CW shows. What's the top one? Supergirl or Black
From the
Lightning?
pilot, or
Just based on what you know.
I mean, I can't even compare. There's such different things.
How do you write about pop culture?
I mean, definitely
You
Black
came up with a
Lightning
list.
is better than Arrow and The Flash right now. But
Arrow season 1.
yes.
Whoa, there
And it's
it is.
telling a more important story.
An Oliver story of suffering on an island.
The billionaire.
We'll be back next week, Worcester.
Thanks for
Love you
listening.
a ton.
Thank
Love and
you.
kisses. Bye bye. Thank you, Mr. Stoltz.
I
Very nice.